Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanmo TV. This is Ben Emlyn Jones on tour in Newcastle upon Tyne and its surrounding areas with Truth Seekers North East. And I'm with Keith Chaston today. It's Chaston, is it?
Chaston. Good morning.
Is that French, is it?
It is actually. It's an old French name. It actually means living under a chestnut tree.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's my roots.
Do you have roots?
Boom, boom.
Do you eat frog legs?
Never had fun, but I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, right. Okay.
I've always been. I used to be Church of England. It's going to be one of those mornings, Ben, isn't
I think so, yeah.
I can feel it in the eyebrows.
But we're in this lovely room. I'll show you the whole room afterwards. I'll give viewers a shot of the whole room afterwards. But we're in this lovely room, which reminds me very much of Cloud 9. And as you can see here, we have candles, and you'll see it all in a minute. But basically, we're in a lovely, sacred space, a sanctuary, as they call it, the Findhorn community. And this is because of your particular profession. So, what is it you do?
Yes, this is my therapy room that I use for workshops and for doing my past life regression. I mean, my title, I suppose, is clinical hypnotherapist. But over the last 15 years, it's been an amazing journey, and I call myself now a spiritual hypnotherapist, because really everything that I do, even if people come for public speaking, I always invite the higher realms to come and join us and help them to release whatever issue they have.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Hypnotherapy is you put people into a hypnotic trance.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's the proper terminology, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Right. And how does that actually work? Because of course we're all familiar with this. You've done for entertainment. There's some hypnotists who actually do this on stage for entertainment.
Yes. Well, that's how I started actually. When I was in my 20s, a couple of years ago, I learned to do hypnotherapy on the stage. And what happened was, I was employed in Jersey as an entertainer, basically. And I was doing magic tricks, and the magic tricks was, it helped if I actually used hypnosis as part of it. So I learned to do it then. And I learned how powerful it was. And so now I know that it is an incredible tool that should be used a lot more.
What exactly is hypnosis? It's a very, very difficult thing to get people to actually define what it is.
Yes. Well, I think it's because nobody really knows, to be honest. I mean, my interpretation is that we can connect to our subconscious mind through hypnosis. We can do that at night when we go to sleep. Very often a medium or psychic can connect to the subconscious mind without having to go into any trance state, because they connect. You see, the subconscious mind, as far as I'm concerned, through my work, is actually not in 3D. So our conscious mind is in 3D, but our subconscious mind is actually out of time. Yeah. So that's why mediums and clairvoyants can, in a conscious state, connect to their subconscious, which connects into the fourth dimension, which is past, present and future. And that's when they can get premonitions and get information. We can also connect to the higher realms. And
this would be because I know several people were having dreams. I mean, a large number of people having dreams, more than can be dismissed as coincidence. In the years leading up to the 9/11 attacks, they were dreaming about these two big buildings being hit by aircraft, crashing down, and of course I had dreams. Just the other night I had a really strange dream. You say it's outside time because this dream seemed to go on for several days, even though technically speaking it was only a few hours while I was asleep at night.
Yeah. Well, actually that's really interesting because there are times, especially during our hypno club that we hold here every Tuesday, and we're going to hold another one on a Sunday night now. And very often if people go on a journey, which we do, we go on all sorts of journeys. I mean, on Sunday we're going to Atlantis. I mean, I know that may sound a bit strange to people. But you know, we believe that Atlantis really did exist.
There's evidence for it. There's buildings that
Yes.
appear to be, or ruined buildings that appear to be the remains of Atlantis.
And people tend, when they go there, they find that just if we're just doing it for 10 minutes, that it could work out that it's quite a few days that people are actually there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's being out of time, isn't it?
Yes, because one lady went to a sacred temple, a spiritual temple in Tibet on one occasion, and we were only there in real time for about 10 minutes. But she actually went there, was there for 8 days, and came back, and it was incredible. The monks met her there in Tibet, and she had an amazing time.
That's incredible. It's amazing. It's
Yeah, it was in our time. It was only 10 minutes, but for her, it was like a whole week. You know?
That's interesting. And there's no, as I said, there's no real definition for hypnosis as such. I mean, I was at a skeptic event once, and this guy showed a film of some people, and it was a stage hypnotist,
Yeah.
and a group of people, and they believed that there was a train coming through a window, a full-size railway train coming through a window, and they screamed and jumped back as if there was a railway line on the floor. And they looked really scared, and they looked really like they had to get out of the way.
Yes.
And he said, they're kind of like, it's all suggestion. And I thought to myself, no, they look like they really believe it.
Yes. What happens is, in hypnosis, we generally have what's called the critical factor. So if somebody said to me, "You're stupid," you know, there's a critical factor part of me that says, "No, I'm not." Generally, that's what would happen. But a child is already, their brain waves are at the state that we normally try and get people to go into hypnosis into. So everything we say to a child, they're being hypnotised in a way with every word, so we have to be really careful what we say, because their brainwaves are a lot lower than ours are. They change when they get to about 10 or 11. So the idea of hypnosis is, the bottom line to me is, it's lowering the brainwaves down to a level where we can access our subconscious mind, which has access then to the fourth dimension.
And this is out of time, and we mentioned
Yes.
premonitions.
Yes.
But it also means perception of past events before our birth, and most interesting of all, you mentioned past lives.
Yes.
This is a fascinating subject, and again, it's dismissed by the mainstream, and they think it's crazy. But there is distinct evidence for this. So, someone in a trance would, for example, remember living another life before their birth.
Yes, absolutely. Past life regression has been for me for the last 15 years an incredible journey. And what it can do more than anything else, if somebody did have a regression, it does lots of things. One thing it can do is firstly give you peace within inside you, because you know that the life you're living now is just a tiny, tiny, tiny part of your whole long existence. And it was really amazing. Just about a couple of months ago, a wife came and she brought a husband, and the husband was quite sceptical. And this often happens. You know, they'll walk in, the husbands, and say, "I don't believe in any of this, load of old nonsense, but I'm just here to support my wife." And he watched his wife have a regression, which was quite amazing. And now this was in the evening, so we finished her regression about 7:45, and then suddenly he said, "I want to have one." I said, "Well, that's great, I'm so pleased that you want to have one." He said, I said, "You know, we'll arrange for a date." He said, "No, I want it now." You know, I'm not a particularly spontaneous person, but I was being told, you know, you need to do this now for him. So he went straight away, and I said, "Where are you?" He said, I said, "Look at yourself," and he said, "I haven't got a body." He said, I said, "Discover where you are and what's happening." He said, "I'm in the early universe. It's at a time before even the stars had been created." Now remember, this is a Geordie man, everyday man that wanted to have a regression. He's not sitting there going to make anything up.
No, he's a skeptic, like you said.
Of course, he's skeptical. But he discovered himself. He said, I'm actually in the plasma of when the stars and the early universe is being formed. And he said, I'm what's called a watcher or an observer. And I go around the universe observing and watching and recording this information. And so he was shocked to bits at that, you know. So I believe many of us have, our souls have been around since, even before the stars were created. And that gives you a lot of peace inside to know that, whatever's going on in your life now, this is just a tiny, tiny little part, and whatever's happening, you've been through loads of stuff before and you've got over it, your soul's still around, you're still doing stuff,
It's a moment in your entire experience.
This is just a moment, and absolutely.
And that is comforting to know that, because obviously a lot of people have really bad lives, and to think, well, don't worry, it's something, it'll be over and then you move on.
Ask about birthmarks.
Yeah. Now the birthmark situation, I've been talking to somebody who, I won't say who it is, but somebody was talking to me about how they've got a strange birthmark on their abdomen.
Yes.
And it's like shaped like a brain. So I said, it looks like a brain.
Yes.
And this appeared quite suddenly. And indeed, I've heard of things like this happening before to people.
So it appeared, so it wasn't there when they were born?
No, it appeared.
Okay.
So it's not a birthmark per se, but it's a mark on their body that appeared.
Yeah.
A bit like,
okay.
Regular viewers will know about this. I won't really tell the story, but I have a similar thing on my arm.
Yes.
So is that connected with past lives?
Yes, absolutely. Birthmarks, my understanding from my work anyway, is that they are generally from either guns, bullets, swords, instruments of, and generally they're fatal. And what happens is, it becomes a sort of your soul, we think our physical body in this lifetime couldn't be affected by past lives, but actually what seems to happen is that when we go into the higher realms, if something isn't resolved, it means it comes back into this lifetime. So I'll give you a good example. There was a lady who came, she went straight away and she discovered that she was a man in a past life. And she discovered that she lived in Victorian times. And she discovered that she was like a Victorian taxi driver with a horse and cart.
Oh, hansom cabs.
Yes,
yeah.
and did her own, or his own, blacksmithing. And on one occasion, the hammer missed the horseshoe and hit one of his toes. And it crushed his toe. And he was in such agony and pain the whole of his life because of that. Because I suppose in those days they didn't have the medical stuff that they can do now.
Things to do with feet often do hurt very badly.
Now, in this lifetime, we discovered that what happened then, he came back, his body was sort of the blueprint of what happened affected that toe in this lifetime, and he was born with 3 bones fused together, or she was, in this lifetime, and had horrendous pain with it. You see, so things that happen to us in past lives can affect us in this lifetime in a physical way. People don't realise that. Lots of back pain is because you had swords. Lots of our past lives we were in battles. Yeah. Lots of ancient battles, and there was one lady, she had 3 teenage sons, and this is really interesting. And she said to me before we started the regression, she said, "These 3 teenage sons of mine, they're giving me hell. What's all that about?" I said, "Well, let's find out." So during the regression, she went up, it's a gateway, you see, into the higher realms. And so at the end of the life that she went to, she felt herself leaving the physical body and she went up into heaven, if you like. And when she was there, we were able to ask her higher self, her higher soul self, questions that she'd wanted answers to. And one of them was about her 3 teenage sons. Why are they giving me hell? And so a higher self said, right, your youngest teenage son, well, he was your father in a past life, and she was shown glimpses of him as the father, and she was the daughter, and she was giving him hell. And so they're sort of getting her own,
It's
getting
kind
his
of a
own
karmic
back.
thing. It's
Yeah,
like
a little bit,
I
yeah.
have to
Yes.
know how it feels.
Yeah. I was never very keen on the idea of karma, but to be honest, I really feel now that it is a major part of what happens.
I've known that too, and not just within different lives. Within a single lifetime. In fact,
Yes.
the karmic cycle of my own life is actually quite short. For example, I was with some friends once, and one of them was really, he was being a bit, I mean, I was in a bad mood, he was a bit insensitive. He wasn't being nasty, but he sort of like, he had like a can of beer in his hand, he went like that, and he squirted in my face, and I went for him, I lashed out, and I struck him, and I walked off. And I walked around the corner, and it was literally less than a minute later, there was these people in a front garden. One of them walked down the garden path, came up and struck me, and I went flat down on my back. This was literally within a minute.
Within a minute, yes.
And it was only long afterwards I thought, that's incredible. It was almost like, you did something and now it's happened to you.
Yes.
It's like, suddenly the roles were reversed.
Yes.
It's incredible. This wasn't a stranger, a third party intervened and attacked me.
Yeah.
I thought, my goodness.
What about what's happening
Karma-
on Sunday?
Karma is happening more and more now. But you see, something that you do in a past life, it doesn't mean it's going to happen necessarily in that same lifetime. It could be that something that you did could actually not happen again until for 6 or 7 lives ahead of that. It could be thousands of years later that it could actually come back to bite you. It could be that if you, I mean, in our past lives, and people have to be aware that, you know, most of us have done not very nice things, and it might be that in another lifetime in the future you might have huge success. You've just reached the pinnacle of, you know, your life, and everything's absolutely fallen into place and everything's wonderful, and then suddenly you pop your clogs and that's it. And that would be karma, and it was arranged like that so that it could be that family things that you did something once in a part, you know, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and these things come back to bite you, but it could be hundreds of years later. It doesn't have to be, I mean, that happened to you, and that was a good sign actually, that it happened just a minute almost later, because it sort of means that maybe you don't have a lot of stuff to clear anymore, that maybe you've cleared all your stuff, and anything that happens just happens almost immediately, which is a good thing.
Could be, I suppose, do you believe that, does the hypnosis experience help people to understand these things?
Yes.
Because obviously, if these things happen
does.
7 lifetimes later, and I think, why is this happening? Why is my life like this?
Yeah.
And you like look for answers, and of course...
Every regression, Ben, that I do, we get answers to why people feel the way they do about certain things. And I have, you know, so many different stories about that.
Like phobias.
Fears and phobias, yeah. And what makes this very real, you know, Ben, is that people sometimes come that haven't come for a regression. They've come because of maybe a fear or phobia. And I don't mention past lives because if you do, they'd probably run out the door, you know, because it's not part of their psyche, you see. But I know from talking to them that it has originated in a past life. You know, there's one Geordie bloke, he came to me, you know, quite a lot of years ago now, and he was an architect, and he'd gone down to London because he wanted to work in London as an architect because he'd get more money. But he had a terrible fear of heights, and he had to go into this very tall building up to the 5th floor to have his interview, and even just walking through the lobby, he couldn't do it, and he had to come home again.
He was scared of being...
He was scared of having to go up in this lift and going up to a height, you see, on the 5th floor. So he had to do something about it. So he found me, and that's his story that he told me. But what was interesting was, he said, whenever I go up into a high place, he said, my legs give way, and I get a heavy feeling on the back of my head. Now, of course, a heavy feeling in the back of the head isn't really normally associated with a fear of heights. So I thought, oh, this is past life stuff. But I couldn't say that because he seemed a very down-to-earth, Geordie man. I thought, I don't want him running out the door. So anyway, I just looked him straight in the eye and I said, let's find the cause. And he went straight away and he started sort of shivering in the chair. And I thought he was having a fit of some sort at first. But I said, what's happening? He said, I'm in a snowstorm. I'm in a blizzard. It's snowing. And I said, discover why you're there. And he said, I'm in the north. I live in the north of the planet, and my family is starving. We've got no food. So I suggested it would be a good idea to find the coast.
Did you say
if I could find the coast. Sorry?
Apologies, did you say the planet or a planet?
North of the planet, yeah, of this planet.
Sorry, carry on.
And so he said, if I go and find the coast, I might be able to catch some seals and take the seals back to my family. So he said, through the snow, I can just make out, he said, the coast. But what he didn't realise was the coast was sort of here. And he was walking towards it, and it looked like he was on the same horizon, but he was actually up a height. And he was walking towards the edge of a cliff, and suddenly his legs gave way, and he fell 400 feet. But it didn't quite kill him, but it dislodged a big boulder. And this boulder came and struck the back of his head and killed him, you see. And then he went up into the higher realms, and that was another shock for him, you know, because he'd never sort of been to heaven before, as far as he was concerned. And then he suddenly shouted out, oh God, that was 12,000 years ago. So he'd carried that fear of heights for 12,000 years. That's amazing.
So he had many lifetimes between them?
Oh God, yeah, loads. I mean, we didn't go through those lifetimes, because when he came back out of it, I said, right, let's go back to that lobby. Yeah, I'm in the lobby. I said, just see yourself going in the lift, and he was able to go in the lift. And he said, yeah, I'm chatting to somebody in the lift. I'm not even thinking about it. He said, so once it goes from the subconscious mind that has held that fear to the conscious mind, very often it will just release it and let it go.
That's interesting. That's like, so it's this very experience of understanding the reason why they have this phobia
can release
can cure the phobia.
Yes, yeah. There was a lady who came here, I know it was 10 years ago, because she emailed me and told me I was here 10 years ago for a regression. She said, I want to do that regression again. She said, it was really interesting, but I feel it's time to find out a bit more about it. But she said, I was hobbling with a stick at that time. I was only in my 20s, she said. I'm now in my 30s, and I've got a daughter now, and I can't walk very well at all because my knees are so bad. She said, would I go to her? So I said, yeah, of course I would. So I went to her, and when she was regressed in her home, we discovered about why her knees were so bad. She had been in an ancient battle. I won't go into details about it, but her knees were terribly crushed in that battle. And because you could imagine in a battle, can't you, that when something's not resolved, when we die, for want of a better word, we don't die, we just leave our physical bodies. It's just like taking off an overcoat. It's that simple. If we haven't resolved what's happened to us in that lifetime, we carry it forward to another life. And so she hadn't resolved the anger. You know, you can imagine in a battle all the emotions that are flying about. It's really awful. And so she's carried that through quite a few lifetimes. But she did say to me that she emailed me a few days after we'd had the regression, said my knees are 50% better, which was quite amazing. We couldn't get the whole lot, we couldn't release it, and that really sort of upset me a little bit. But I do realise that we can't just release them, we need to actually work through it in a lot of ways. We got 50%, which was quite good, but the other she has to do in her lifetime. It was part of her plan, you know, before she came here. And that's another really interesting thing, all the contracts that we sign, you know, before we come here to work through these issues.
Is it, Do you believe, I mean, this is going back in, there's a famous book by Michael Newton called Journey of Souls, and there's another one called Destiny of Souls.
Yes.
In a sense, he believes there is a kind of higher existence outside the lifetime cycle, which people go to. He said we perceive it at the moment of our death. Like, this is why people who have near-death experiences often report this.
Yes.
But we see ourselves, in a sense, outside the cycle of life and death. And that, as you mentioned contracts, it's as if we actually agree in advance to live certain lives as part of our
Yes.
journey to actually educate ourselves.
Yes.
Do you think that's correct?
Absolutely. I think that we sign a lot more things than we think we do, and we agree to meet certain people during the course of our lifetime. It's all planned out. I mean, some people don't have a major plan. Some people will just pass, go up into high realms and be there just for a very short time and connect with the first body they can get their hands on, so to speak, to come down, because they love physical earth life so much, but because they haven't planned anything, they sort of wander a bit aimlessly. I mean, if you wanted to become a great violinist, say, you would have to plan that, quite meticulously. You would need, firstly, parents. You wouldn't be born in a part of the world where it would be very difficult for you to achieve that. So if that was part of what you wanted to achieve, you might be born with parents that were music teachers, for instance. And you would plan all the different people that were going to be in your life to help you to achieve that. And so the contracts that we make are to do with people and to do with things that you agree to as part of your purpose, part of your also part of what's happened to you in the past. You have to work through all those things, So this planet really is like a school. It is a school. I absolutely believe that. And wherever we are learning. We're spiritually growing.
Amazing. And I've heard several people report that not all their past lives or alternative lives, because some people claim it's interdimensional, are as humans. Some people report being other species of animal, sometimes known species of animal, that is, other species that we recognise as fellow inhabitants of Earth.
Yes.
I've heard people reporting being fish in the sea, or whales and dolphins,
Yes.
or birds and things like that. So I remember flying, being a bird, or
Yes.
ape.
Yeah. One person once said to me, I once asked their higher self, I said, what life, out of all the hundreds that you've had, was the best life you ever had? And straight away they said, when I was a bird.
Yeah.
When I was a bird, that was the best life I ever had.
You can imagine. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, yeah, a lot of animals have very high qualities of life, like dogs who have a good home, and they have a great life.
Yeah. See,
every time they want to go out for a walk, it's like so exciting. Yeah. They jump up and down for joy.
Absolutely.
So they may not be able to have the comprehensive abilities that we do, but they have
Ben, that they have of the joy of life and wanting, that is how we are in the higher realms. And very often a lot of the pets that we have been with us in past lives as brothers and sisters, and all different relationships we've had with them. I know it sounds a bit odd, but that's my experience. There was one lady, down-to-earth lady, and when she went into the higher realms after the life that she'd gone back to, one of her questions was, I normally get people to write half a dozen or so questions about what they'd like answers to, and one of them was that she wasn't an Indian person, but she felt connected to India, and she loved the idea of India. And so I said to her higher self, has she ever had a life in India? Would you show her glimpses of a life that she may have had? And immediately she says, oh, I'm a man in India. So that shocked her. And then she said, oh, I've got this wonderful elephant that I absolutely love, and it's been with me, this elephant, as my friend, if you like, for 30 years. And then suddenly there was tears and said, oh my God, the soul of that elephant is now my mother in this lifetime. Now that sounds really weird, but That's the truth of it. This is the truth of it. And we need to understand that we swap roles. It's a bit like, when we're in the higher realms and it's time for another Earth adventure. Right, it's time to go back down another Earth adventure. So who's going to be mum? You're going to be mum this time. You're going to be dad. You'll be the kids. Okay. And it's a bit like that.
That reminds me, didn't Shakespeare say all the world's a stage?
He did.
And each of us play our part.
And there's a lot of truth in that.
When the curtain comes down, the actors don't die, they just don't disappear.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When they play out, they go on, they do other productions.
We've got to understand now, we need to get this out there, that when we think of good or bad, alright, and this is a really good, a great story for you. This will help people to understand about good and bad and why we see it. We see it on a 3D level, but actually if you can look down and see it in a different way, like the masters and the angels and all those in the higher realms, they see things differently. This guy phoned me up, it's a few years ago now, and he said, my wife last year went to see a regressionist, and when she was there she went to Ireland in a past life, and she said she discovered that her husband in that lifetime had murdered her. And then when she went up in the higher realms after she'd been murdered, she discovered that her husband then was her husband now. It's the same soul, you see. And so she went home and told him, "You murdered me in a past life." Now, that's, it's not something that you'd expect your wife to say to you. Anyway, what was interesting about this was that he was a scientist in this lifetime. And so there was a major part of him saying, "What a load of nonsense that is." But of course there's your spiritual side that everybody has that sort of does question it a little bit. What if I did? What if it is true? What if it... So a whole year went by and he was sort of having this battle within himself. What a load of nonsense, my science side says that's rubbish, but the spiritual side was saying, what if I did? And so a whole year went by, and so in the end, at the end of that year, he had to find out if it was true. So he found a regressionist. It wasn't me at that time, but nothing happened. And I believe it didn't happen because there was a part of him that's a bit, and his subconscious mind didn't want him to go there and see it. So another year went by and he was having that turmoil again, what if I did, what a load of rubbish. And eventually he had to find out. And so that's when he found me and told me that story. So he came along and he went straight away, and I said, "Where are you?" He said, "Oh God, I'm in Ireland." So that's where, it was Ireland where his wife had been murdered. Anyway, I moved him forward a little bit, and he suddenly went the brightest red you've ever seen anybody go in your whole life. His ears, his nose, his whole, everything was in a terrible, and he was wailing, he was weeping. Now, he wasn't actually shown the moment that he did murder his wife.
Well, that'd be awful.
But, yeah. Exactly. But and that's why it didn't happen the first time. But this time, he didn't have the expectations, and his mind had sort of said, "Go on, we'll let you see it." But it was about 5 minutes afterwards. So he knew he'd done it. So I had to bring him out, of course. And it was about half an hour before he was in any fit state to go home. And I thought, well, that was really interesting. I thought that was the end of it, And then 2 weeks later, he phoned up and says, "I want to do it again." I thought, "Do it again? Why do you want to do it again?" He said, "Because I need to know why I did it." And so I thought, well, I can't take him to that again, to let him go through all that. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll take him to just an hour before he dies in that lifetime, before he passes. And so he found himself in prison. It was just a couple of years after he had done the deed. And he said, "Oh God, somebody's coming to kill me for what I did." So anyway, he died. Now, this is really, really interesting. When he went up in the high realms, the first person to greet him was his wife, who he'd murdered, and she hugged him, and she wagged her finger at him and said, "You were supposed to forgive me, and you didn't. You killed me instead." So everything is opportunities of learning. And what had happened was, his wife had been having an affair, we discovered, in that lifetime. And the fella that had been having the affair with his wife had taunted him in this bar when he was having a drink. And he'd gone home to confront his wife. I've been told you've been having an affair, is that true? And of course things got a bit out of hand. But the plan was, and the contract was, to learn for really true forgiveness, and he couldn't do it. It didn't quite happen. It's a very difficult one to learn. But you see, to learn true forgiveness, to get it as part of who you are, you need somebody to forgive. Do you not?
Yes, you need someone to do you wrong.
Yes, exactly.
So you can actually experience that.
And very often, you know, the higher realms will send. Let's say you've gone really way off your path, and and you're not where you really need to be, and you're just not listening to your higher self. You know, they've tried everything, every single thing, and eventually the higher realms might send a gang to go and sort you out, so that you would land up in hospital and start to rethink. You know, you've got a period where you're in a place where you can really think about your life and where you need to go.
It's really interesting. Grigory Rasputin, the mad monk of Russia.
Yeah.
A very interesting chap he was. And he said something similar. He was a member of a group called the Klisti in Russia, which was it was actually a group of monks who said that they were so keen on the sanctity of forgiveness and repentance. They were Christian, and that they would commit sin. They wouldn't hurt each other, but they'd have an orgy, a sexual orgy or something, and then they'd go to penitence and they'd have the sacrament of forgiveness and things like that. And it's funny, that I'm curious to know that the man this scientist who found out that in a past life he'd murdered his wife, how did it affect their relationship after the sessions you heard? Did you find out?
Obviously nobody would know who they are. However, a few years later, it was discovered that she, in this lifetime, had gone off and actually had an affair with somebody, and he could not forgive her. So he hasn't killed her.
He's killed her this time.
No, thank God. But I did discover that. So it is history repeating itself. Because it wasn't learned the first time, so he's trying again. So when he was up in the higher realms, obviously he was saying, look, let's try this again and see how we get on. So the affair isn't really. It's for him to learn that lesson, which he hasn't learned, and he hasn't learned it in this lifetime again.
That's it. Well, I hope really in the future they will. I mean, obviously he may have to go through this experience again, but I hope he finds peace. I mean, I found peace. The situation I reported about, where I did something bad to my friend. Well, he did something bad to me, and I did something bad to him.
Got to get over that.
Yeah. Well, we went to, like I said, and then then a third party intervened and assaulted me. I went and saw my friend the next day. He had a black eye, which I'd given him, and I had a split lip. And we actually we made our peace the next day, and we apologised to each other, and I think it did us a lot of good actually in the long run. He was more sensitive with me in the future, and I didn't lose my temper with him in the future either. Since then, and we've gotten a lot better after that. So these things can be very enlightening, and they can be good in the long run, I think. But,
tell Ben what we do once a month there, Keith. Once a month. Once a month, the soul retrieval of the children.
Oh, yes.
Brilliant stuff.
Yes.
What happened last week?
Yes.
Could I will go into that in a minute, but I want to ask you another question. Now, of course, there's a simple answer that I'm sure you've had before, and it's an important question you need to answer. There are many people who say this is nothing but a fantasy. What you're indulging is in a fantasy, and these people who come in are essentially they're letting their imaginations get carried away with them.
Yes.
And since we don't know what hypnosis is, it's very easy to dismiss it as a form of suggestibility, and you're just encouraging them to let their minds run wild. And how do you respond to that?
Well, if I thought that was the case, then I would not do the work. I really would not do the work. Every day it is confirmed to me that this is real, that it is true. And one of the reasons is because I feel that when people go back to a past life, it's not actually a memory that they're retrieving from the past. We know that every thought, every emotion that somebody's ever had in this lifetime has been recorded in great detail. And we know that that's the same in past lives as well. Every detail of a past life has been recorded, so that when you go back to a past life, it's just like going back in this lifetime. Everything's recorded in great detail. The smells, everything are there. Now, I know psychiatry will say that everything, the brain, sort of creates the mind. Everything is just a creation of the brain.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about this in detail in my talk tomorrow.
Oh, right, okay.
But it's an interesting idea.
However, what I believe that they are missing is the spiritual factor, the fact that we are a soul that inhabits a physical body, okay, and that our brain is a receiver and a transmitter, and our thoughts are not just from inside our head. Mm-hmm. And so, I need to get this out because it's important that people understand, for instance, that hearing voices. My experience now is that hearing voices is not something necessarily from inside the head.
No, I mean I think so too because
think that too? Oh,
yeah, because Anthony Peake, who's a guy I've been studying, he studied the hearing voices phenomenon.
Yes.
And he's sometimes found it's actually connected to extrasensory perception. So, for example, a guy's driving. This is actually, I met someone who actually experienced this, and Anthony Peake talks about it too, although they're talking about two different people, I found out. I thought they might be the same person. Guy's driving along one day, hears a voice in his ear, pull over now. So he hears it in his head, and he instinctively stamps on the brakes and, oops. And he comes over to the side of the road, and next moment a massive lorry comes round right in the middle, right on the dotted line.
Yes.
And he would have struck that lorry.
Yes. Yes.
And Anthony Peake believes that is actually your higher self, the daemon. That is the part of you that's in this world between worlds.
Yes. And I believe that when we do a regression, I can actually, at the end of a lifetime, it's really, really interesting. This is that when they go up into higher realms, and some souls get stuck, and we'll talk. We can talk about that, the stuckness in a minute. But most souls do find the light, go into the light, and very often there's huge tears because in that lifetime a father or mother or grandparent might come and guide them back into the light, which is it's absolutely a beautiful moment. And when they get there, once they've settled back in, it's possible to connect with their higher self. And I speak to their higher self. And higher selves are really interesting. Some higher selves have had earth lives before. Some have never been on the earth before. And they just guide souls that are down here. There was one just fairly recently, which comes to mind because it was only a couple of weeks ago, was a lady who had a Roman soldier. It was equivalent of a colonel in the Roman army. Colonel in this lifetime, that equivalent in the Roman,
centurion or whatever they call it.
Whatever it was. I was talking to him, and it's so fascinating. And he was saying, I've got blood on my hands, And I said, what were you doing before I called you in to talk to you today and to help this lady understand her life now? And he said, I was looking down on the earth, but at the time when I'd retired and I'd lived in this beautiful place, I was just looking at it and reminiscing before. So I always asked the higher self, and sometimes they were reading a book, sometimes They're not doing anything with technology, they're all doing stuff with the family or things of peace and calm, you know.
Yeah.
It's just lovely.
That's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to imagine. Yeah. It's interestingly, we've been talking about Graham Hancock with the other members of Truth Seekers North East. He's got some excellent books about a book, and it refers to. He often draws on other books that I've read by people like Rick Strassman. There is actually a lot of research being done on the brain now, and so you can actually. There are machines that actually can monitor thoughts in your brain. So you said that thoughts don't necessarily come from outside your brain. The interesting thing is there are patterns of electrical activity in your brain, which will be picked up by a very sensitive instrument called a positron emission tomography scanner. But what was surprising was that even though these thoughts can be traced, there's no part of the brain which everyone always expected to find as neuroscience moved through the 20th century, which was known as the I module, or the seat of the self,
yes,
which is where these thoughts come from. That has never been found.
No.
They've poked and prodded and they've gone to every part of the brain they can find. There's nowhere where the actual self, the consciousness, resides. And the reductionist materialist neuroscientists are having, the materialist neuroscientists, having terrible trouble trying to work out where this is. I saw a lecture by Susan Blackmore. I'm going to be talking about her tomorrow. And she's come up with this idea, and I know that Daniel Dennett has come up with this idea, that essentially the self is illusion. It doesn't exist. There is no self. And Anthony Peake very pithily puts it. Well, Dan, who writes your books then? It's a fascinating subject, and and the interesting thing is that this world between worlds, this higher self,
yes,
to actually perceive the universe from, or the existence, the multiverse from that higher self, is something that is happening more and more often because today we have modern resuscitation technology in hospitals,
yes,
which means near-death experiences are becoming more common.
yes,
They've always been around. They used to be quite rare.
Yeah.
Because when your heart stopped, 100 years ago, if your heart stopped, that's it, curtains.
That's it, yeah.
Now they can resuscitate you.
Yes.
So now we want to talk about, as you were saying, you mentioned lost souls.
Yes.
Now this is a frequent plot device of horror movies, and there is some truth behind it, but don't have nightmares. What's the truth behind it, Keith?
Right, well, I'm just going through from my own experience. Very often a soul can get stuck when it takes off the physical body. As I said, it's just like taking off an overcoat. But there are times when, for lots of different reasons, that a soul may stay earthbound and not go into light. Now, the light only, actually, I've mentioned this before, the light only is around you. This is the light that guides you back into the higher realms for about between 2 and 9 days. So once it's gone, it's very, very difficult then to get back. Okay? Very often children that pass, and it's really, really sad, if they die suddenly, if they leave their body suddenly, you see, we've got within us an etheric body, and that is part of us, but it's a lot lighter. It's more of in a more crystalline structure, and that is the body that we use to go back up into the higher realms. So you still, and it's identical to the physical body. So when you leave your heavy, dense physical body, everybody says, what a relief it is. Whatever life they've had, it feels great. And they're just hovering above their physical body.
Looking down.
Looking down.
See the doctors
Everybody that does a regression does that and experiences that. It's very rare that they don't. So, I know you always know when somebody's passed and hasn't gone into the light, because they tend to feel lost. And what happens is our mind, and the law of attraction, I believe, is an absolute truth, because when you pass, what your mind, when you leave your physical body, your mind creates your reality, just like it does here, but it does it more instantly. And so if you feel lost and you can't find the light, and water, is one where if people die in water, if they drown, my experience is that I find it a lot harder to get into the light. And there's been so many dozens of cases where, in the Second World War, for instance, we've done a lot of soul rescue where lots of ships went down and the sailors are still there.
The Battle of the Atlantic.
Yes. And so we've opened hundreds of portals during soul rescue sessions. So you could get stuck because you might have been a woman in a past life where your husband had gone to war. And if that's the case, you pass, you've died, but you don't want to leave the house because you want to wait for your husband to come back. And he might have already died. And so the soul will hang about in the house. It might be that you've got a house that you love dearly and you just don't want to leave it. It might be that you love drinking. And so when you've passed, you think, oh my God, I've passed or I've died and I can't have a drink anymore. They probably don't drink in the home.
This would explain why pubs are often haunted.
Exactly. So that people will go to a pub, a spirit will go to a pub because they can't obviously actually drink the physical stuff, but what they can do is they can get the essence of it. They can sort of feel the essence of the alcohol. Do you know? Can you sort of get what I mean?
Yeah, they very often, from what I've heard from various psychical researchers I've worked with and talked to, it's the people who come in and get drunk themselves, and then they in a sense, they latch on to those people.
Yes, yeah.
And there's even photographs taken in pubs, and there's like spirit hands and things like that appear in the photographs.
Yes.
And it's as if they're trying to, so this person's drunk, and now I want to sort of like latch onto him and experience that drunken feeling myself.
Yes, exactly. And they can. Because if you attach yourself as a spirit to someone, you can feel the emotions. Now, this is an interesting thing that happened to me, again, a few years ago, if this is okay.
Sure.
It's about spirit attachment. There was a lady came to see me. Now, only for 6 weeks had she had feelings and thoughts going through her head that she wanted to commit suicide. Now, she was a middle-aged lady and never had thoughts like that before, but suddenly she'd started driving to the coast and wanting to run in the sea and drown herself. And she tried to kill herself by running out in front of traffic. And so she obviously had to do something about this. And so she found me, and she came quite a distance actually. And as she was sat there, it sort of came to me that she may have an attachment, because of course it's hearing voices. And so we discovered that she'd got into a church. She was feeling a bit down this particular day. And this, and it was then that she picked up this attachment. And we didn't know that until I said to her. Now, she wasn't in hypnosis. She was just talking to me like this. And I said, you know, I don't know if you're open to this, but I'd like you to be open to the idea that maybe when you went into that church, there was what we might think of as a spirit that may have attached themselves to you. And I said, if that's the case, he or she may tell you who they are. And she suddenly said, oh my God, he's telling me his name's Joe. And I said, right, ask Joe why he's there. And she says he's feeling really, really, very, very angry. And that he committed suicide, and he did it despite a girl. And so I said, look, ask him how angry he is. I thought I'd do some tapping for him to get rid of his anger, you know, because he couldn't go in the higher realms feeling the way that he did. So I said, ask him between 0 and 10 how angry he feels. 12, he said. So I said, look, do you trust me? And he said he did. I said, well, look, so because she was tapping, all right, doing the tapping on this
emotional
anger,
freedom technique.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we were tapping on a ghost. But because he was attached to her, the energy that was moving with this anger, it was actually affecting him. So after we did just 2 rounds of even though I've killed myself and I feel really angry that I did it, I didn't mean to do it, you know, very passionate. We got it down to a 4. And she said he's feeling, I can sense, she said, that he feels like...
That's some progress from 12.
Remember that he wasn't actually telling her to commit suicide. He was trying to tell her what he'd done. He was trying to unload it onto her. I committed suicide. So all she was hearing was commit suicide.
So she was experiencing emotions that he had inside him.
Yes.
He was transferring onto her.
Yes,
Oh
exactly.
my God, yeah.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? So anyway, when we got the emotion down a bit, this anger down, I said to him, look, you know, Joe, you can't stay with this lady. You know it's not very practical to be there. He said, I'm not going, I feel... And they never do go, to be honest. You have to have some encouragement there. So I said, look, Joe, I said, when you were a little boy, he said, nobody loves me up there. He said, I don't want to go. I said, when you were a little boy, and of course I was just talking to him, like the lady was there now, like where you are. And I said, when you were little, I said, there must have been somebody that you loved. And suddenly she said, oh, I'm being shown him as a little boy of 6 and his grandma. And his grandma's holding his hand, and off they're going up in the higher realms. And after that she never heard the voices again, and she never felt any thoughts of committing suicide. Now, let me just say this in front of this camera, and I'm saying this because there might be some psychiatrists or psychologists that are listening to this. Now, what would have happened if she'd gone to see a psychiatrist?
Prozac, I guess. Prozac.
That attachment, he wouldn't have gone into the higher realms to be able to start his new life, and she would have had those thoughts. Now, yes, those drugs, they do dumb down any attachments that are there, that is true, but it isn't getting to the cause.
It doesn't, no. It just does more... You end up in a...
You had stories like that, things like that happen. It's only going to help confirm the truth of this, isn't it?
The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So you ask yourself, what's most successful? Putting a padded cell on olanzapine, or having this kind of therapy? And in my experience, the kind of therapy that Keith and I are talking about, in a sense, has validated itself through its effects, because people often come away from it so much better off. They come. I mean, you only had to mention this man's get this spirit to think about his grandmother.
Yes.
That was all it took, just the thought of his grandmother, and that released
the thought of his grandmother actually called out to his grandmother.
Yeah.
That's what it was, and his grandmother actually came to him.
And the woman herself was much better after that. She
never had those voices, because I was able to connect to her.
There you are, see, there you are. And you also mentioned...
And it took about an hour, you know.
That's it, so...
She didn't even go into hypnosis, you know, we're just tapping.
Amazing.
So interesting, yeah.
Do you know, you mentioned lost children, what's that about?
Right. Sometimes children can have accidents, car accidents, or die in hospital, and they get they get sort of lost. They're in a sort of dream world state, and so consequently they haven't gone into the higher realms. I'll give you a really, really good example. This is really quite extreme, but it's one that happened a couple of months ago. We held a soul rescue here, and this lady in hypnosis connected to a young girl who was about 9 years old, and she hadn't gone into the light. And she said, I can't go into the light because I'm lost and I'm frightened. She said, my mother was a drug addict, and she used to beat me. And she said, I used to have to put calamine all over me for the wounds. And she says, eventually, she stabbed me to death. Now, I'm saying this so that people, will think about this. And she said, my mother, I know, died. And if I go into the higher realms, my mother's there. She says, but I'm frightened to go because of what she did to me. And so it was really quite emotional, this whole thing that happened. So anyway, I said to her, So the lady was actually channeling this little girl, and this is what you can do in hypnosis. You can actually channel these souls. And I said, look, who do you trust? And again, she didn't really trust anybody, but I mentioned a grandma. And she says, well, I suppose I could trust my grandma, but I wouldn't want her anywhere near me. And so her grandma did come and talk to her and did lead her up into high realms. And she said, my mother is there, but she's in the distance. And she obviously was very guilty of that time, of what she did to her daughter. You know?
Oh dear.
It's really, really awful.
Yeah. But again, in this world, whether we have many lives, these things can be worked out. We can actually come back and we can.
Yeah. So
we can amend.
So
we can
what,
make amends.
what will happen is maybe the mother will have to come back and be really totally different. So they might swap roles. The daughter might be the mother, you know, and it might work out very differently.
So Keith, what kind of activities do you do with here in this room? As well, you do your hypnosis. How does that work? Do people call you up and they come in and you?
Yeah, generally people discover that what tends to happen is their higher self will say to them, you need to have a regression. That's what tends to happen. I mean, a lot of the time people will come because they're curious and they've seen past lives, some maybe on the telly or something, and they think, well, I'd like to have a go and see if I've had a past life. And so they do it through curiosity. But that doesn't seem to happen as often as their higher self saying to them, although they don't realise this, you need to have a regression, you need to discover why you're feeling the way you do right now, or why your family are behaving the way that they do, you know. And so there was a lady that came that was, she was an Asian lady, and she'd had a terrible life. She'd been beaten by her whole family, and her family had arranged a marriage for her, and just discovered that in the past life she was, this is going back to contracts again, that she was contracted to have an arranged marriage, but she didn't go through with it. And so the whole family have come back in this lifetime for them to show some forgiveness at how they behaved, but for her to go through that without committing suicide, which she did in the life before that. You know? So that was really interesting. So the higher self, she needed answers. And the only way she could get answers as to why the family were behaving the way that they were towards her was to understand the lives in the past and how they are still affecting you today. And this is what people need to know. People don't realise how much of their lives now are affected by past lives. And when somebody mentioned about something, a mark suddenly appearing on them, that could be that it was appeared at the time that something happened to them in a past life at the very same age, in the very same time. Could have been some sort, it would have been a wound of some sort, probably a fatal wound.
Oh, that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
And do you have group sessions here? Because you've got lots of chairs in this room. We'll be showing you
Yes.
the room in a minute, actually.
We have, yes, we do workshops here. We have all sorts. We've got a pyramid workshop that I'm doing on my own shortly. I'm joking. We have soul rescue here once a month. We have the Hypno Club, which is a great fun thing where people come along. We have all sorts of journeys and adventures. I also do some tapping groups here. I did an Insomnia one fairly recently, which was really
Insomnia?
good. Yeah.
People who can't sleep?
Yes.
Right.
Bring your doobie to that one.
Yes.
You see, again, now this is interesting. If we've got a moment just to mention this about sleeping. Now, you know, psychologists and psychiatry would say something different, but this is my perspective on it. That the subconscious mind, one of its most important jobs is to protect you and keep you safe. And that also is to keep you safe from emotions that you have. And so very often, you know, people that in their young lives as children have had terrible trauma, and the mind has subdued that, it's pushed it down so that you can continue to live your life without having that on your mind the whole time. So, and very often that's where alcohol comes in, because if you've got gremlins from the past, the alcohol will push them back down if they start to come up.
People with drink problems often experience trauma.
And that's what the drink does. It's a bit like drugs in a way. It subdues it and pushes that emotion back down. So these emotions are there for... Now, I'll give you a really good example. A Geordie fella. Now, he was a big Geordie fella, a while back now. And he came and we weren't doing past life regression. He'd just come for insomnia, and he just wanted me to make suggestions to him. You will be able to sleep well at night, you know. But I knew there was an underlying cause for this, and it's probably, from what he was telling me, it's probably a past life issue. And he went straight away, and I said, "Have a look at yourself." And he looked at himself like this, and he said, "Blimey, I'm a woman." Now that shocked him. You know, can you imagine a big Geordie fella saying, "Blimey, I'm a woman," you know. Now, to me, that sort of confirms some stuff. What does it confirm? Well, it confirms that he's come to me to get answers and to be able to not sleep it. And he's saying to me, he's a woman. Now, Geordie bloke, he's not going to say that, is he? Not really.
Of course not, no.
Of course not.
Unless he really had a past life as a woman.
So, he found himself on the beach, and then it got really serious because he was a young woman and his daughter had just died in her care. And the whole of that life, she loved that little daughter so much that she was in a state of despair the whole of that life. Guilt, can you imagine the guilt? Absolutely.
It'd be unbearable.
It would be unbearable, exactly. So what happens is, in this life, when she died at the end of her life, she never made peace with what happened. And so she's carried that forward in this lifetime as that Geordie man to try and make peace with it. Now, if you go to sleep at night, of course you go up into the fourth, fifth dimensions, and you are able to connect immediately with those emotions that are there. They're so powerful. And your subconscious mind is saying to you, no, we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there, to all those emotions. And so it keeps him awake. And that is happening to millions of people all over the world. And sometimes it's night terrors, and of course the night terrors are from past lives, things that have happened, horrible, maybe ways that they died wasn't very nice. And so
would this be like nightmares, people having bad dreams?
Yes. And so again, the subconscious mind is preventing you from having to go through that by keeping you awake. Now, to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There's lots of others. For instance, there was one woman, and she couldn't sleep, and discovered that in a past life, her husband had put the pillow over her and smothered her and killed her. No. So the subconscious mind was saying, "Hang on, don't sleep, because if you go to sleep, because it's not in time as we are, it thinks of it as yesterday. What happened when she was murdered, that was just yesterday." And so it's saying, don't go to sleep, because remember what happened when you went to sleep last time, it was fatal to you.
Yeah, that's absolutely, I mean,
I have loads of stories like that. Gas, early days of gas, when gas was introduced, and people used to die with the gas.
Because if the fire goes out and the room fills with gas and they die.
Yes, that's right.
So that's it for people. So people who have insomnia may well have.
I'm not saying in every case.
Not in every case, but it could. One of the causes could be that they died in their sleep, sometimes through violent circumstances, like murder, and then. Yes. Right.
Or
that's interesting. So
it's trauma that they would, if they went to sleep, they would have to connect with. That your mind is trying to keep you safe and saying, not a good idea, let's not go there. You know?
It's not controversial to say that the subconscious mind remembers things that the conscious mind doesn't. Even in very conventional science, they say that you get cases of people who will suddenly start speaking in languages they spoke when they were children, but they've forgotten as they got older. Things like that. And of course, they thought, well, I can't speak that language anymore. I used to speak it when I was a kid, but of course, you don't use a language, you lose it. And suddenly they start speaking it again. And they say, well, there's only one explanation for that. Then they somehow, the memories come back. But of course, we're talking here about not just events that have happened in our current lifetime, but events that have happened in other lifetimes that are in the subconscious mind. I mean, I have amazing dreams. It's like, the thing is, I often have trouble remembering dreams. I wake up, and if it's a very interesting dream, I'll do an audio recording or something and just explaining what the dream is like, because I know that in half an hour it'll have gone. So the audio recording will help me remember it.
Yeah, definitely.
And,
good idea.
So if I have a really remarkable dream, that's a good thing to do. That's because your dreams can actually be very revealing.
Yes.
I think,
And very often dreams are you trying to resolve those emotions. We're resolving issues here on the earth when we interact with people, and we're trying to, many people that are in our lives, we need to resolve conflict from the past. And at night time, we try to do that as well. In our dream state, we can try and resolve those conflicts and make peace with it. But a lot of the time, it's that traumatic that it's so difficult. So your mind says, well, we'll not go there then. We'll just keep you awake.
Yeah.
And to me that it makes a lot of sense.
So if this kind of treatment became more widespread and more acceptable, supposing you were funded by the NHS, for example, just think of the good that could be done. Just think of how much better things could be.
Exactly. But at the moment,
of course, the big pharmaceuticals.
It's not mainstream enough.
And the big problem is that Pfizer couldn't sell Prozac anymore. That would be a revenue stream they'd have to give up. They don't
I don't want to knock the medical profession, because somebody reminded me the other day that without them I wouldn't be here right now. Which is absolutely true.
Yeah. I was in the NHS for 23 years myself, so yeah.
So I do respect them hugely. However, they need. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we put it this way? Wouldn't it be nice if we could work together?
Yeah. Instead of them just dismissing what we do as nonsense.
Because whenever I hear them, they do, not the medical profession, but people. I only listen to the radio, and you often hear them knocking people like me and other therapists.
Yeah, I'll be talking about that tomorrow.
Yeah. And we'll be lucky if we're not getting locked up soon, to be quite honest, because there are lots of people now that are in huge, serious trouble.
Some people are calling for that, yeah. But that's the climate we live in. But it's good that you can still practice as you do, and that's
absolutely
important.
Yeah. And I'm so glad as well. I can remember a psychologist coming to see me once, and we spent 5 hours together this day. And she actually, I won't obviously say her name or what university it was, but she is in one of the universities in the northeast as a psychologist, and she teaches psychology. And we sat talking, and she said, I'd like to do a regression one with me, because I don't believe it. And of course she had an amazing regression. I was so pleased. Yeah. And she got some answers as well to some things. And she said that a lot of what we do is similar, she said, but there's lots of things that I would really like to take back with me and use, but she said I would be kicked out. So I'd be made a laughing stock and I'd be kicked out. So I'm just so pleased that I am free. Exactly. That I'm free to be able to do it the way, and I've developed my own style. You do over time, I've developed my own style.
It's surprising. I mean, I'll mention this tomorrow actually, but I wonder how many of these straight-laced, materialistic types who are in professions relating to science and medicine secretly believe us, but will not say so, because they've got rent to pay like everybody else does, and they fear for their professional reputation. Because I know for a fact that some of them do, because I've spoken to them, and I've spoken to people who say, never mention my name, but I think you're right. Well, let's look at this. This is the room. This is the room we're in. That's the tripod. Just move the tripod out of the way. You see pictures of the Buddha here, and these beautiful Buddha images. And here's the chairs that people sit in. And this is look at these. There's another Buddha there with his search for enlightenment. It's amazing. It reminds me of the Buddha I saw in Glastonbury. If you watch Ben Goes on Tour. And look at these orgonites. And these crystals in this fireplace. Here's some more chairs. There's hypnotic chairs and things like that. It's really quite remarkable. Now you may be wondering, there are black spots on the wall, and there's another one. There's actually 4 of these black spots on the wall. Now what they are, they're hypnotic focuses. So part of the process for putting people in hypnotic trances, as Keith was saying, is to get them to focus on the black spots. And you just focus on there, and that's, it's you are feeling very sleepy kind of thing that you've seen. That's what the black spots are for. So this here is Keith's office and sanctuary where he does his work. Amazing place. It's actually got a lovely energy here. At the moment I walked in, I felt it. It's like Cloud 9. If you look in the description box, you'll see links to my videos from my previous tour where I interviewed the Cloud 9 girls. And there's like it's a tree with a plant with some kind of citrus fruit on it, or little tomatoes. Lovely. Lovely place. What's this called, Keith?
This is called the Orgon Energy Pyramid.
What it feels, I can feel energy coming off it. It's amazing.
Can you feel energy, John?
Yeah. Now there's a footpad here. And what's this footpad for?
Right, but the idea is that
It's a wire.
this, in its present state here, it's like a chemtrail buster. So it can go outside, and it can the energy from the pyramid goes up and out into the atmosphere, and it can go for miles and create a nice positive energy. But it can also be used for helping people with various issues and problems. And the idea is that they would sit down on a chair, put their feet on that little foot plate there. So can we grab a chair? And then what happens is that it can be then the energy can be directed at the person who's sitting down.
Oh, it's got like it rotates. It's like a turret. Oh my God! Don't shoot! Oh goodness me! Wow.
So
I wish Nick Hayes was here and he could see that.
There, it can go to your head and throat area, and then that goes to your heart area. Now what happens is the energy gets, with an orgonite pyramid, wherever you place one in your house, it can create a lovely positive atmosphere, because what it does, and this is based on the work of Wilhelm Reich, okay? And it draws in life force energy. Now in the Far East they would call that chi or prana, but we tend to call it life force energy here in the West. And so what's happening is all these pyramids the energy from them is being directed towards this central orgon wand. And this orgon wand in the middle is full of crystals and metals. And it shoots, so all the energy is shooting out here, and it goes to the person that's sat there, and then when they're touching the foot plate there, it goes back here and back, so it creates like a circuit. It's not plugged into anything because it's actually drawing energy from the ether, life force energy.
Wow. I say Nick Hayes, he's a guy I know in Oxford.
Yes.
You've heard of him?
Yes.
Yeah, he'd be very interested in this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, this is and so would Leon Southgate, who's another friend of mine who does this sort of thing. Well, thanks for showing us that, Keith. That's amazing.
Not at all. So
Keith, do you have a website or anything like that so people could find out more about
Yes, thank you for asking. It's called keithmichaelchaston.com.
Right. And on that website will be details of everything you do?
It mentions all the different journeys that I do. It mentions for instance, being able to see, one of the things that I do, which is not mainstream at all, is taking people without having to do a regression. I discovered that it's possible. So you can't go into hypnosis and suddenly go to heaven. You know?
No, near-death experiences, like
Yeah.
But this isn't flatliners. You can't actually half kill people
for
experimental purposes.
But what you can do, Ben, what you can do is you can go into hypnosis, which means you're accessing the subconscious mind, which is in fourth dimension, which is out of time, and you can then. So if we're here in 3D. That's us. This is 5D or 4D, right? And what happens is that if you have a regression, when you leave your physical body, and everybody feels it, they feel themselves leaving the body, going up to the heavenly realms. Now you can't go into hypnosis and suddenly go there, but what you can do, without doing a regression, is to go up, to raise your vibration enough so you go here, and they lower theirs a little bit to meet you halfway. Mm. So you sort of got a halfway place where you can meet all your loved ones. And there was a lady here just a couple of weeks ago, and she was a nurse, and she'd lost her mum 6 months ago, and she was desperately upset, and the grief was huge. And so she heard that this was something that I did, and she came here, and for half an hour she was able to connect immediately to her mum in this house where she's living. Her mum's living now in High Realms, and she met all her family there. She went and sat at a table, kitchen table, and sat and had and all the time the tears, and it was so highly emotional, and yet it was a lovely experience for her. And her brother was there who had passed, and he was on drugs and stuff, and he was looking really well. Her father, and it was amazing. Yeah, it was wonderful. So that is something else that you can do. And your pets. Very often people have had pets that have passed and they miss them terribly. And they can go into hypnosis and they can go and take them for a walk. Go and meet them. It's crazy, isn't it?
I mean, I think I already know the answer to this question, but I want to ask you, does this fulfill you, what you do? Does it make you happy? Does it fulfill you? Do you believe you're doing something really worthwhile?
Absolutely makes my heart sing.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Keith, this is Keith Chaston.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being on the panel of TV.
Thank you for asking me, Ben. It's so lovely to have this opportunity to let people know a little bit about, you know, the truth of what's happening with souls and our past lives and everything.
It's been interesting talking to you. Thank you very much.
It's been great.
Thank you for watching the panel of TV viewers. Do check out my other videos, especially this 5th tour of Truth Seekers North East that I'm on, including my lecture. It's called Skeptics. Who are they? Why are they wrong? And why does it matter? Thank you for watching. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.